You guys are all probably well aware of the fact that my Fnaf collection is pretty important to me. I have quite the obsession with Five Nights at Freddy's merchandise, and I enjoy collecting it. If I didn't enjoy collecting it, I wouldn't have a whole room dedicated to it. And it's for this exact reason that I've been pondering the question of, how would I start over? I obviously would never willingly do this because, oh my gosh, that is just such a daunting task, but I really just want to think about it for a bit. The main reason I think about this pretty often is just because collecting is kind of boring when you have most of the stuff you want, and it's difficult trying to find new collecting goals all the time. Like, yeah, there's a ton of Fnaf stuff that I don't have and would like to have, but most of it is just really expensive, rare stuff that's not really that rare and it's just expensive. And all the stuff that is major goals for me to have in my collection will run me well over $1,000, and I'm not willing to put that large of a dent in my bank account for a Freddy Fazbear statue. Especially for one that retailed at $300, is made out of foam, not plastic, and is also not even life-sized. If you can't tell, I'm very spiteful of the fact that I don't have the NECA Freddy Fazbear statue. But hey, at least I have my Morbid Enterprises Freddy. This is my child. And speaking of my children, I have things in my collection that I literally cannot replace, which would make starting over especially daunting. I have one-of-a-kind prototypes. I have things that I've searched for years and could only get after finding one single listing within the span of 6 years. And I feel like as such an experienced collector, I really want to make a video like this, both to help new collectors and to know what I would do if I ever found myself in this nightmare scenario. Now, I do feel like it's quite important to know exactly the context of me, just to know, like, all the stuff that I'm going to suggest doesn't apply to everybody, and that's kind of out of my control. I live in the United States. It is the easiest place to find Fnaf merch because Fnaf is an American franchise and the toy company is an American toy company. With that being said though, I'm going to try to keep this to be how I would personally see as the cheapest way to get these items. Because I hate spending more money than I have to. I really do. Which I feel like is something that everybody can say, but unless it's to get something early for a review, I really do want to get things at retail price if possible, and if not, I like to get them at the bare minimum as cheap as I can find them online. Which can sometimes result in searches that last several years, but if it's something that I'm not really that urgent in getting, then waiting is probably worth it. Let's use this for example. I could have easily gotten all the Wave 2 figures boxed for years. I've wanted them boxed for years. But that would have costed like $700. And I'm glad I waited, because I found one on Facebook Marketplace and I got them all for $90. Waiting is usually worth it. At least for older products. But that being said, if you see a good deal, you should always take that opportunity. If it's a price that you're willing to pay for that thing you want, get it while you can, because it's probably not going to be there in a few days. And that's just the sad reality of collecting. So, with all that out of the way, where would I start? Well, action figures are easily my favorite Funko Fnaf line, and I'd hate to lose my entire action figure collection since they've released, I've gotten every single one, and I really like this line. So that would probably be my place to start. Now, Wave 1 of the Funko figures is surprisingly one of the hardest to collect. Not necessarily because it's rare, because if you want to settle for the re-release figures, you can get those super easily and at retail price. But if you want the originals, which I honestly think look substantially better, then you're gonna need to look a bit harder. And probably look into paying a bit more. In my personal opinion on the values, based on what I've seen, the re-release figures usually go around $15 if they're loose and around $25 if they're boxed. But the original figures go for around $30 loose and upwards of $80 boxed. And even though it'd be substantially more money, I'd honestly go for the originals personally, just because I have a lot of nostalgia for them. I find them a lot nicer looking and more premium feeling. And I got all the original ones back when they originally released, but trying to find them again new in box was a pretty fun experience collecting-wise. and I can't say I wouldn't enjoy doing that again. A cool thing about the first wave is that on rare occasions, you can find very cheap listings of them from people who don't know that they're originals or don't know the difference between the originals and the re-releases, which can lead to you getting some pretty good deals. Which is how I got my original figures boxed, because they are very, very difficult to track down because of, blurring in with the re-releases on search results. But luckily, because of that, a seller who doesn't know much about Fnaf merch looking up the price of these things would value them much lower than they're actually worth, which can lead to you, obviously, spending a lot less on them. And then, honestly, I'd go for the re-release Foxy as well, just because he has a substantially better color palette. He's the only one that I really find a big improvement, along with Springtrap. And it's worth having both Foxies, just because they stand out enough to just be completely distinct on the shelf. And, as I've stated before, Facebook Marketplace is awesome. Like, I didn't get any of my FNAF 1 figures on there, but I did get some of my other figures on there. But I just looked on there out of curiosity while making this video, and that's a good deal right there. That's why you look on Facebook Marketplace. None of the old people who use this application know what the heck a Freddy Fazbear is, and they always underprice things. Speaking of Foxies, the last Wave 1 figure is a stinker. Glow-in-the-Dark Foxy is the rarest Five Nights at Freddy's figure, by a long shot. This stupid thing is so rare and hard to come by that it's hard for me to even pinpoint a value on it. In terms of FNAF figures going up for sale, he is easily the least common one to see, and finding him will not be an easy task, especially boxed. He's boxed very weirdly with his limbs spread out and stuff, and he has no front sticker on it, and it's a very, very strange looking box, which is probably a part of the reason why he goes for usually upwards of $800. If you want him loose, he'll probably run you around $100 to $200. I got a damaged one a while back, and I'm pretty happy with him. He looks alright on the shelf, if not a bit awkward looking, but I'm at least happy to have this figure. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't want the boxed one too, because that is genuinely just such a cool thing to have. Not because the figure is cool, this thing is so lame, but just because of how rare it is, I want it. But I get that most collectors aren't freaks who care about glow-in-the-dark Foxy like I am. Series 2 is a peculiar set of figures, to say the least. Unlike Wave 1, this set has had 0 re-releases for the core Nightmare animatronics. However, the Funtime Foxy figure in the set has been re-released for some reason. That figure as a whole didn't sell too well, and it's not very popular or desired, so you shouldn't have too much trouble finding that one. Not a lot of people cared about it when it came out, and nobody really cares about it nowadays. That being said, the Nightmare animatronics, while not as expensive as some figures we're going to be talking about later in the next wave, they are still worth quite a bit. From my experience, the standard Nightmare figures are worth around $50 to $60, and that's quite a lot for a single figure. However, they shouldn't be too hard to find cheaper ones because they do show up every now and then. My best advice for collecting is just having saved searches on eBay and Mercari and Facebook Marketplace. eBay and Mercari are much more prone to people overpricing things, but Facebook Marketplace is majority people who have no idea what the heck they're selling, so that's probably your best bet on getting a good deal on a lot of this stuff, even if it is a much more difficult way of going about it. The Nightmare figures boxed usually go for over $200, but I found a Facebook Marketplace listing of all 4 of the Nightmares boxed for only $90, and that was a pretty dang good deal, and I'm still shocked I even got it. And I'd honestly say the Nightmares were probably the hardest ones to go back and find boxed though, cause it took me forever to find that listing. And I got a very similar deal for the Sister Location figures, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Jacko Chica is a figure that I still do not own boxed, and it is one of my most wanted ones. It's usually pretty consistently priced around $250 to $300 boxed, maybe more if it's in like mint condition. But I still don't have this figure boxed, and I've been waiting for a decent deal on it that honestly is never going to come, and I'm probably going to bite the bullet eventually on a pricier one. But Yeah, if I had to restart my collection, I would dread finding this figure again, because even out of boxed, it's worth so much. At least it's not as similar to glow-in-the-dark Foxy, where he is basically impossible to find. Jago Chica is fairly easy to find if you want to pay a lot. But yeah, it's a pretty rare case for you to find the Jago Chica figure for a decent price, especially with the pumpkin. Which, funny story, when I was little, I lost the pumpkin for my Jago Chica figure, and I actually didn't have a pumpkin for the figure for literally like 5 years, until eventually I bit the bullet and spent like $80 on another Jago Chica loose just to get the pumpkin again. And $80 is still a good deal, which is terrifying. This thing wasn't even that rare when it released, but I think we can probably blame the Jaco Bonnie figure for raising this thing's price a lot. I'm honestly surprised they didn't do a Jaco Chica re-release when the Dreadbear set released, because now it's very hard to have the duo complete. Now, the sister location set of action figures is very similar to the first wave in a lot of ways. You got the 4 super important animatronics and the character that they all led to the creation of as the Build-A-Figure. There's a crappy glow-in-the-dark variant that's worth way too much money. But then there's 2 things that are not in common with the FNAF 1 set that kind of bog it down in terms of collecting. First thing is that the 5th figure in the set, rather than being part of the main set, is just an exclusive and it's worth a ton of money now. And then there's also the fact that this set has no proper re-release. Now that's not to say it doesn't have re-releases, because Funko, geniuses over there, released re-releases of Funtime Foxy and Ballora. Just them, but not Funtime Freddy and Circus Baby. You know, Funtime Freddy and Circus Baby, the most popular characters from the wave. They're not going to re-release those ones, but they're going to re-release Funtime Foxy and Ballora for some reason, and still include the entered parts, even though you can't complete entered anymore. This wave makes me angry, because it's such a good set of figures, but there's just so many garbage decisions from Funko with this set, that I really just struggle to appreciate it as much as I'd like to. But, like I said earlier, I did get a very, very, very impressive and insane deal that I still don't even know, like, what the seller was thinking putting up for this cheap, but I got all 4 of the Funtime figures for only $60, and then I got Glow-in-the-Dark Baby separately for like $35, all from the same seller. Forgot to specify in that recording that they were all the new in-box versions. Now, this is a deal that I'm never gonna find again, so if I had to recollect all these figures, I'd be kinda screwed. But, like I said earlier, your best bet is probably going on apps like eBay and Mercari, having saved searches, and checking them on the daily to see if you can find any good deals. 'Cause that's typically my strategy when it comes to finding things. Just checking daily, waiting until I see a price that I'm willing to pay, and then I finally get it. It can take days, months, years. My phone just fell. I've waited days, months, years to find deals in different scenarios, but at the end of the day, as long as I find them, that's kind of all that matters. Now, I do find a lot of stuff on Facebook Marketplace, but I don't really look on there as often because it's kind of a hassle, but I'd say if you're getting into collecting and there's a ton of super expensive stuff you're trying to get a hold of, that's probably your best bet to find it for any kind of good deal. Because although it is a very difficult thing to navigate, and it's very location-oriented, and there's a lot of garbage on there, you will find stuff that's being sold by people who have no idea what they're selling, which means that it will be much cheaper. And you just gotta hope that the seller will be willing to ship it to you, because most of the time, Facebook Marketplace things do not actually offer shipping. I usually offer the seller a bit more money to incentivize them to ship it to me, which works half of the time. Then other times they'll just be like, nah, I'm not doing all that. Which is understandable, because their intention was not to ship in the first place, but you know. Then another thing about navigating Facebook Marketplace is you should usually just search general terms relating to the franchise you're interested in, and then looking through that, because you're not really likely to find much if you search specifically for what you want. Because a lot of the time, Facebook Marketplace listings are just labeled as the most basic things ever. I've seen listings for super rare FNAF items that are literally just titled FNAF. And, like, I don't think the sellers on Facebook Marketplace, they don't care. Which, again, is why I don't really like looking on there as much, because it's such a hassle to dig through. But it will be worth it once you do finally find something. And I don't regret my time spent on there. Now, the Pizzeria Simulator wave is going to be the last wave I talk about in any sort of big detail, because it's really the only one that's still interesting to collect. Everything after this point has kind of just not went out of production, and if it did go out of production, it was very recently. But yeah, the Pizzeria Simulator wave had an original release, and they're only very slightly different from the re-release that was released a while later. I'd say the original releases came around 2018, and then the re-releases came around 2020, I want to say. And the re-release set of the Pizza Sim figures actually included Lefty, which greatly decreased his price, but I feel like it is important to note the differences between them. And this goes for differentiating any original Funko figure from the re-release version. The original releases have a plastic layer over the figure inside the box, which is very, very noticeable and makes it look a lot different, and that's the easiest giveaway to see if it's a re-release or not. If it has that plastic layer over it, that's an original figure, and it's probably worth more. And with Lefty being the most valuable, he luckily has an even easier way of telling, which is the Walmart sticker on the re-release will be to the side of the box, while in the original release it'll be towards the middle. And then there is the Blacklight wave, which I don't have too much to say about, since they are just basically the same case collecting-wise as Wave 2 and Wave 3. And all the advice I gave for those waves still applies for this one. But the Blacklights are a bit lower in value nowadays than they were a few years ago. So, confidence section of the video over. McFarlane Toys is a line of Fnaf merch that has ended, but it's one that I've collected every single product for since its inception, and oh my gosh, recollecting this stuff would be hell. All of the sets are rare nowadays. Every single one of them. And they are all very expensive. You see, these sets when they first released weren't really that pricey. So let's see the first set they released, the Show Stage, one of my favorites. This set originally released for about $35, which is pretty reasonable for what it is. Now, it's worth about $300. If you're lucky, because it's usually more. If I had to, restart my McFarlane collection, I probably wouldn't go for all of them again. I'd probably just go for the figures that I particularly like, and I would probably only collect the figures and wouldn't go out of my way to collect the sets too, because that would just be painful, and probably not very viable, because, believe it or not, I don't have, a bajillion dollars to dump into FNAF Lego sets. Something expensive that I would probably go out of my way to get is the Funko statues, particularly the Security Breach ones. The Lefty and Foxy ones aren't too bad from what I've seen, but Glamrock Freddy and Gregory in particular is a statue that I really like, and I'd probably go out of my way to get it again, even though it's worth quite a lot nowadays. U2's is another very prominent FNAF merch brand, and their stuff is usually in stock. A lot of it is still in stock. You could get a lot of it pretty easily, even secondhand. But none of the FNAF U2's products seem particularly hard to find secondhand, which is good. And obviously, tons of stuff is still in stock on their website. Now, I'm sure some of you are probably wondering why I haven't mentioned Plushies at all yet in this video, and to be completely honest, it's because I'm not really an expert in that regard. I have a lot of Funko FNAF plushies and FNAF plushies in general, but I've never really gone out of my way to get any of them. I just kinda get whatever ones I can get, and if I can't get one of them, oh well. FNAF plushies aren't something I'm dedicated enough in to where I would spend that much money on one secondhand, unless it's one that I really, really feel like I want. But there's just not a lot that I really care about enough, since Funko doesn't really put out that great of plushies, and I'm not really that inclined to buy them. Sanchi plushies are another thing that I haven't really been too dedicated in collecting. I only have 2 of the original Sanchi plushies, and that's because I just had them. But I haven't really gone out of my way to complete the set, just because I don't really find them that interesting, I guess. I like collecting weird Fnaf plushies, like these ugly backpack plushies for example, which I'm aware is a pretty unusual thing to collect for, but I just find it a lot more intriguing and fun to look for than your usual Fnaf plushies, because the Sanji and Funko stuff just gets so boring later on because there's so many expensive things that I don't want to pay that much for. So looking for weird oddities from other companies is usually my go-to. Now, rather notoriously, if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, the Sister Location Hero World set, and just completing the Hero World line in general, was the most difficult task for my collection. The Sister Location Hero World pack was only ever released outside of the United States, which is obviously inconvenient for me. I think it released in the UK and maybe Australia, but I don't think it made it to any other parts of the world. It was sold at one location in the US, which was the Funko store in Washington, but, you know, I live on the other side of the country. So yeah, completing the Hero World line and getting this pack was easily the most difficult thing for me to do in my collection, and it was so satisfying finally finding that one Facebook Marketplace listing and the seller was willing to ship it to me. But that being said, if I wanted to complete this line again, I most certainly would not be able to. I don't think I'd be able to find another one of these Sister Location packs. It took me months to find one of them, and I don't think I've seen a single one since. Hero World is a line that I really enjoy, and I wish Funko made more of them, but with it not having many figures, you would think it'd be an easy line, but obviously the Sister Location pack just kind of throws that off. I think the most obvious issue to redo my collection would be the irreplaceable stuff, like signed stuff and prototypes, but there's obviously nothing I would be able to do about that, so it's not even worth dwelling on. The last thing I want to touch on briefly are Fnaf Funko Pops, which are not for everybody, but personally, I think they're a pretty fun line to collect just because there is a lot of them, but not too many to where it's overwhelming. And most of them are pretty easy to find for a decent price as long as you're willing to wait, which is pretty fun because I'm always wondering which pop I'm going to find next. Since they tend to show up pretty randomly and inconsistently, because there's not really too many pops that are particularly rare over the others, they all just kind of randomly show up, which I like. But yeah, sorry for the sort of like scatterbrained video here. I just kind of wanted to go over this kind of weird scenario that I thought of in my head and kind of wanted to show you guys a bit more about how I ended up with a lot of the stuff I have. I have a lot of more substantial videos in the works right now, but they're all very, very high maintenance and are gonna take a while. I'm trying to get them out as fast as possible though, so expect some of those soon. And yeah, I suppose I will see you guys in the next video.